Well, hello and welcome, everyone. This is the closing session to the Systemic Leadership Summit 2019. And as we are gathering, as there are more people joining, I would like to extend to you a very warm welcome. And today, what I'd like to do actually is make this a really interactive Q&A rather than one where I just sum everything up, but I'm going to ask for your active participation in this session. And what I'll be doing is I have some presentation material with me to support our interaction. I'm going to wait a few more minutes to make sure that we have everyone who wants to be at the Q&A session to actually join us. And we have participants from across the world. I'll say more about that later, how many people from different countries actually joined. But compared to the kickoff session, if you were also present at the kickoff session, it's important to know that the chat function is on and open again so that you can actively participate as well. So everyone who is tuning in, welcome to the Q&A session for the Systemic Leadership Summit. We have more and more people who are joining. Let me just watch on my screen to see if you are coming in okay. And if you want to type something in the chat, feel free to do that and say hi. And we'll start in a minute or two. We are still with a small group, but it's slowly growing. If you're tuning in now, welcome to the Systemic Leadership Summit closing session, the Q&A session for our summit, our week-long summit that is almost over. And this Q&A session is going to be an interactive one, so you have a chance to participate with everything. Waiting 2 more minutes, and then we'll definitely start. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Anne. Anne is joining. Thank you for being here. Let's see who else wants to type in the chat who is joining us today. And then we'll start soon. I have my second screen next to me so I can see and read everything that you are typing in the chat so that we can start this interactive session. So it's 8:04 p.m. Central European Time, 1 more minute, and then I'm hitting it off with the Q&A session, the closing session for the Systemic Leadership Summit. Okay. So again, welcome. Jennifer Campbell here, but you know my face and the sound of my voice by now if you tuned in to the summit this week. Thank you so much for joining this closing session. And I have a presentation with me to guide this process, but it's also an opportunity for you to be actively participating. And we have a number of things to cover. And depending on how many questions you have, how interactive you are, we will be in for about an hour, maybe a little longer. And of course, it depends on whether you want to stay until almost the end of the presentation, where I'll also be revealing who won an all access pass, because I sent you all an email with a request to submit a survey where you indicate how you experienced the Systemic Leadership Summit this year. And everyone who did so up until about 2 hours ago is going in for the draw for an all access pass. So that's a very exciting thing. And I wanted to do that live also. So everyone who's here, you have an opportunity, if you did that with the survey, to be one of the all access pass winners today. But first, we are going to go to the content. And in order to do that, I am going to share my screen with you and give an indication of all the things that we'll be covering in this session. So let me share my screen here. Okay. So wrap-up presentation, Q&A closing session for today. And again, welcome everyone. And this is what we'll be covering today. What I'd like to do is give you a general overview of the summit and the participation. I'm going to be really brief about that, but many people are very curious about how many people attended and where everyone came from, etc. So I'm happy to share that with you. Then I would like to start off the interaction because we've had a total of 17 individual speaker sessions. And I'd like to look at what are the key points of these individual speaker sessions. So I want to briefly touch upon them and then look at some main themes across the sessions that we saw in the summit. And I'm also going to invite you to add your ideas about that. Then we're going to go into answering your questions. We didn't receive that many because during the week, we've had quite some interaction on the online community space. And also in our summit page chat box, we've had some questions. A few of them refer to the content, but mostly practical questions. So we didn't receive that many. I think that many people are also still reflecting on what they saw and what they learned. And so, but I will be covering them. Then we have the evaluation. I want to say a word or two about that, especially if you haven't been able to complete that yet. And that's a time when I'm going to draw the winners of the All Access Pass. We have two types. I'll be drawing 3 people for the Access Pass for the summit of this year, and 1 an All Access Pass for all summits that we've had so far in the Systemic Leadership Summit. So 2017, 2018, and 2019, all in one ticket, a full year access to that. And then I would like to briefly cover with you what's next after the summit and how you can continue your participation and your learning process when it comes to systemic leadership. And especially if you're a winner today, but also if you purchased an All Access Pass, I would like to look at how you can make most of it again. The online community, I would like to say a little bit more about that and also about the idea to start a mastermind with people who really want to learn together and reflect together on the Systemic Leadership Summit materials. And then I have a closing word or two, and then we're done. So that's the program for today. Hi, Jean. Thank you for joining. You have a question about the stage or state of the systemic leadership in 2019. So that's an additional question. We'll get to that when we have the Q&A section here. Okay, so hang on to that question. I'll get back to that. Now, first, let's do a review. And so we've had 17 online sessions in 7 days, and there were 9 days time to actually watch them all. So we started last week on Sunday with the kickoff session. Then we've had 2 sessions on the Monday, 3 sessions on practically every day, except yesterday and Saturday we had 2, and today is the closing session. And because of the 48-hour window, we still have Saturday sessions open until tomorrow. So one will close at 9 and one will close at 11 a.m. Central European Time, and then they are all closed. The kickoff sessions and this Q&A session are live sessions, and they will remain open on the Systemic Leadership YouTube channel. We've had 1,244 people register for this summit, which is a record. We've never had that many. Usually a little over 1,000, but not well in the 1,200 numbers. So again, thank you so much for registering and for participating. We've had, up until this point, until right before I started this live session, I looked at how many people we have in our online community. And like I've said before in the kickoff, this was a new platform for the summit to actually look at how can we interact during and after the summit. And we've had 140 members join the community, the LinkedIn group, an unlisted group for now until probably tomorrow. Then it will open up for more people because the summit is then over, and it's called Systemic Leadership. So if you haven't been able to participate or be in there for during the summit, then you have an opportunity to do so as of today or tomorrow. Then what was also new is our YouTube channel. Before, we both had the online community space, the free space, and the all access pass space in one closed environment online. And we decided to do this differently and to have the free participation on YouTube. And what happened is that many of you, well over 33%, decided to actually subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you'll very likely find much more information popping up about systemic leadership. So that also carries the systemic leadership name, youtube.com/C for channel /systemic leadership. So what's also a record today is from how many countries people participate. And as I'm looking at this, I noticed that there's a country missing. I'm sorry, Denmark, I know that you need to be on the list. And also, if someone is online right now, and if you miss your country, please let me know. I took this from YouTube statistics and also from what I could find in our systems. Email names usually tell a lot about where people are from. But Argentina, Australia, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Canada, Chile, China, Croatia, Czech Republic, Finland, France, Germany, Ghana, Greece, Hungary, India, Israel, Italy, Kenya, Luxembourg, Mexico, New Zealand, Pakistan, Poland, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, South Africa, Spain, Switzerland, Thailand, the Netherlands, Uganda, United Kingdom, and United States. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This is so amazing to use technology of the internet to allow people from all these countries to participate. So thank you so much. Then there's so many things to say about what were highlights, how do we look at the summit, how was it perceived, and I'm going to say more about that when we get to the evaluation part. But I just wanted to share with you that Dr. Peter Sanji's session was the most viewed video. He was the first one on. After the kickoff, his session was on Monday, January 14th, and almost all participants saw his video about systems leadership, solving problems that really matter. And we're going to go into his and all the other sessions in a minute. So, what I'd like to do now is we are a small but strong group in this live Q&A session. And what I'd like to do is go through these individual speaker sessions and talk to you and with you about what were the key points from the sessions. And this year I decided to do this interactively because I can mention them all to you. I've had the honor and privilege to see each session at least 3 times, one being in it, one when editing all the sessions, and then once this week, at least once this week, with all of you as participants. So on the kickoff, I didn't just start with the kickoff with all the welcoming and sharing with you all the practical sides of the summit, but also I did an introduction about the value of systemic leadership. And I want to know if there are any key points that you'd like to add to the overall umbrella that I wrote here in my overview here. And the umbrella of my presentation was to actually invite leaders in organizations who want to co-create change with the people in their organization and who want to do this systemically. That requires that they lead differently, that they look at their organizations differently, and that they change differently. And so that means that it's important for them to see the system, to share the space in their organization, to allow for interaction and shape the shift. And that's actually co-creating the transformation they want to help let evolve or let emerge in their organization. So I'm really curious if you could type in the chat if there are any things that you like to add. And yeah, let's see what you remember from the kickoff session. I'll wait for a second or two so that you can get the hang of it. And you can type in as you'd like to add. What you can also do is work ahead and just say, type in the name of the speaker and then a key point that you would like to share. And of course, I will add things as we go. So anyone who would like to add to the kickoff session about the value of systemic leadership? I don't see anyone in the chat just yet. And maybe it's difficult to recall because it's a full week ago. And also, you may have seen many other sessions, and maybe things are already a bit blurry when it comes to the first session, if you were there. And so what I'd like to add also about my introduction is that we are very much experiencing that leaders in organizations still use change approaches and methodologies that are linear and that do not really work anymore. And we are on the same page. You're just typing in the same thing as I was saying. And so this is very important also. And I know that you have a question about that later on. And this is part of the answer. This is to do with many leaders are stuck in the old paradigm. And so it's very important to meet them where they are, where they have difficulty in letting go of that paradigm, because letting go of it a little bit is going to help them to open up a world of generating new solutions and generating new ways of thinking. So really meeting them where they are and saying, okay, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, that's going to result in the same thing over and over again. It's not going to help you evolve your organization and getting ahead with your leadership and the people. So that's a very important aspect also. More and more people are typing things in. Thank you so much for joining. I see Adioseo, welcome. So let's go to the next session. And here we have the session with Peter Senge. And he talks about systemic leadership, solving problems that really matter. And one of the things that we all learned from this session is that how important it is to slow down and to take time to reflect. So what are other key points that you recall from his session? Let's see if you can type anything in the chat that is an important key point for you. I know that many, if not all people, saw this session, so there should be some things that you recall from his session also. Thank you, Kylie. Kylie's typing huge appreciation for everything you've done, Jennifer. Thank you so much, Kylie. Thanks for tuning in. We are reviewing all the sessions before we get to the individual questions in this Q&A closing session. And we are at Peter Senge right now. Things that I find really important from Peter Senge's session is also the umbrella for this summit. And that's why I put him at the beginning of the summit. And actually, this is what I learned from him a lot, is the importance of seeing the system first and stepping into each other's world. If you recall, where the business person and the person who's, for example, in day-to-day farming or agriculture, and how they can visit each other's world to create better solutions for the food industry, for example, and where two very different organizations, Unilever and Oxfam, could come together and co-create and really understand each other's world and create something that's bigger than them. So seeing the system, bridging the differences, doing the work that really matters, meaning the thing that really gives you, fuels your energy, and it's something that's bigger than you. So that's very important. So knowing what your purpose is. And then to also take time to reflect again about what's going on. What I also see is focus on what makes a difference. Leadership is not stuck to one person. And our message is to stay human in the VUCA world. Thank you so much for adding that. And yeah, so those are some of the key points in Peter Senge's session. Let's move on to Christian, who was with Peter on day one with language of spaces. And I didn't fill in the blanks here, but one of the very most important key points in her session was that with language of spaces, she created something for people to function well and to unpack their potential in a self-organizing setting. And so that's what we predominantly talked about. And I'm really curious to know what your key points were when listening or watching me speak with Christian. Hi, Antonio. Thanks for tuning in. Wow, we have many people with names starting with an A. So thanks for tuning in. If there's anything that you would like to add to the key points for Christian, please let me know. I know that from the feedback that for some people it was slightly more difficult to follow this session because we were also talking from the area of holacracy, which we just briefly touched upon. which is a methodology to actually structure an organizational system differently than from hierarchy. And at the same time, what prompted Christian to create the language of spaces was that holacracy allows a bit less for the personal space and to create or to have the space to deal with all your personal reactions and wants and needs in an organizational and in self-organizing setting. So that's very important. Also, I see here roles need to be in service of the organization purpose. And to add to that, it's also a choice. So you choose whether you fuel a role with your energy or not. And stop the blame game. And it's also the other way around. So it's also that the organization should not be using individuals for its purpose, its sole purpose only. So it's very much a balance and the exchange of that's really happening. But one big key takeaway for people is, okay, a role is not necessarily personal, and it has nothing to do with me chasing my personal goals and needs in a role that I fulfill for the organization. It's about the organizational purpose. Hi, Guy. Thanks for joining. You add space to differentiate the organizational from the personal. Yes, that's also one of the key points in this session. So let me move on to Klaus Lambertazzi. He was the first speaker on Tuesday, and the topic was leading with relationship intelligence. Also a very profound session. But yeah, you'll hear me say that about all sessions. Thanks for joining, Simon. Hi, Simon. Thanks so much. Please hang on to your question until we get to the Q&A bit of this closing session. So this is a Q&A. It's called that, but currently we are reviewing all the sessions for the key points before we go into the individual questions. So hang on to your hat, Simon. We'll be right back there. And it's also similar to a question that someone else asked. So we'll definitely get to it. Any things you'd like to add about Klaus, about his session? And what I recall as a very profound thing is he actually shared about how he used a systemic approach called organization and relationship systems coaching to work in a setting that was very strenuous. He had to close down his business unit of over 200 people and make them all redundant, including himself. And how the project was received really well and was finalized 1 month early, actually. And that's a remarkable thing to do. So I was very happy to have him on the summit so that he could share that with others and be an inspiration for other leaders who work in the corporate space and who actually, someone who actually pulls this off as a leader. Let's see, anyone who wants to add to that? Don't leave me hanging here. Just please add as much as you can, because it's a co-learning experience still before we close off the session. I mean, before we close up the summit. If I don't see anything, I'll move on to the next session. I know there's some slight delay until you hear me speak. So there's some time that I'm leaving between what I'm saying and what you can put in the chat. But let's move on to the next one. And you know my question then that's coming up. Yeah, thanks, Simon. He had some great practical examples he did about the emotional field, about how he created space for people in his leadership team to share in his meeting what they were experiencing and what they were feeling. So that's one of the examples. Then we go to Nomi Nathan's session, also a session that was viewed, I think it was a third viewed session in the entire summit. And she talks about the power of constellations. And so one of the key points was, what are constellations and how do they actually work? What does it mean if you work with a leader, or if a leader wants to create a constellation of their organization or their own family system, to gain some insight about what's going on in the system, where they find themselves, what roles they take up in systems, and also about the perpetual repetition of patterns that are not really helping the system, where the system is stuck, and how constellations can help see what's going on. Um, Yeah, I agree with you, Kylie. You're right. I loved Nomi's intuitive constellation mapping. And this is also part of constellation work. Um, but Nomi has the power to combine the intuitive and the practical. And I think that appealed to a lot of participants in the summit, to actually know, oh, I can do this myself, and or oh, this is how it works, and let's break down the magic around it a little bit, and understand how that goes, and that it's also possible to trust your intuition when you work with constellations, to see your system or to get unstuck. Anyone else? Ah, there's more people. Um, Welcome, Karyan. Thanks for joining us. You say the possible overlay between personal and office settings in constellations. Well, what's interesting about constellations is that they can be used in personal settings, and usually it's family constellations. They can be used in organizational settings. The way of working with them is slightly different. And as Nomi explained, certain things that touch upon the personal are difficult to then also speak to in an organizational setting. But on the other hand, how we do things in our family systems are actually very similar to how we then show up in an organization. The way we fulfill roles can be very similar, and so can be also very insightful. So yeah. Know me, and you say to see parent-child dynamics everywhere. So also in organization dynamics, exactly. And how we, in the traditional sense, structure organizations and set up the roles. There's a vertical parent-child type of dynamic. As soon as we get to the self-organizing, then it's slightly different, at least in the organizational space, to just tie it back to Christian. But in the personal experience sense, there is a parent-child dynamic, definitely. Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining. I see that you say Nomi mentioned time, place, exchange, belonging. Is that part of a named framework? Yes, it's part of a named framework, and it's the Bert Hellinger framework. So Bert Hellinger is the birth father of constellation work. And there are certain patterns to like systems in general, especially when you look with constellations and you work with constellations, then the order of the constellation is very much tied to these. So who comes first is about place. It's about, are you contributing as much as you should be contributing from the place that you have? So that's exchange. The belonging, everybody wants to belong. And with organizations, it's a choice. With a family, it's not a choice. You can never really break free from your system. And then there is time. So who came first and who came after? And so these are all part of the Bert-Hellinger framework. Yes, there's also the comparison with the stars and the constellation of stars. And that is not so much about the individual stars, but actually a star constellation is what we usually look for or look at. And that same analogy can be used for constellations in organizations, for example. Yeah. Aduseo, thanks for adding that. Start to explore the link between your own system and the wider systems, because usually there's always a link, because you as an individual are also a system. And you are a smaller system in a larger system of a family or an organization. And again, that's part of a larger system, and so forth. All right, let's continue to Christian. Many people found this presentation, this session very refreshing about humanification, going digital, and staying human. Now, what are the key points that you found from his session? And what always sticks to my mind is the onset for him to be in this space in where he is right now with humanification. And that has to do with where we started in the session, where he had a very personal experience of his 3-month-old daughter who was terminally ill, and doctors could not find a cure, and they basically just sent her and Christian and his wife back home. And that Christian used a mindset where he kept on thinking in solutions. He's very much into the technological startup space. And he didn't know anything about biology or the human body or cells. And he just started studying. And from that studying, he compared human development and technological development, and into the stages that he presented in this session. So yeah, very profound learning that resulted in a cure for his daughter, who is now 8, I think almost 9 years old now. Yeah, Kylie, you say meta patterns, and that you'll be hunting for that evolutionary development pattern everywhere now. Isn't that how that works? As soon as you have a new lens to look at the world, that you then end up seeing it everywhere. It can be a very useful lens also, to know that, because many people are scared of technological development and the pace at which it's going. But once you understand that the way we evolved as human beings is actually the same way that technology evolves, except technology goes much quicker, but that it's the same process and the same steps, there can be some something to hang on to when you see the next wave of development coming up, whatever area you're looking at. Anyone who wants to add to Christian's session? Okay, then let's continue. So we have, this was on the Wednesday, or at least Central European time, with Dr. Alexander Laszlo. And there we talked about thrivability and being the systems you want to see in the world. I see, you say that you have something to add to Christian Kramer still, using biological evolutionary analogy to show future of humans and their relationship with work, a more positive picture of our possible future. Definitely. So Christian also invited us to not be scared of technology, but to embrace it, and to focus on staying human. And because what we have in our hearts is something that cannot be taken away from that. In that sense, we are safe there, and there's lots of possibilities also with all the development. So thanks for adding that. Back to Dr. Alexander Laszlo. What I really enjoyed in our conversation is that we talked about the different systemic lenses and about surviving, sustaining, and thriving, and how we are so much focused on sustainability, and that there's something like thrivability and what makes a viable system. So when is a system barely alive, and what are the conditions to actually thrive? And then the connection to yourself and what do you actually want to see. Yeah, Karian. So it's about going beyond sustainability into thrivability. Let's see if anyone else would like to add something. I'm just going to wait for a second or two. And if I'm going too fast and I'll still see something pop up, then I'll just go back just like what I did before. Don't see anything popping up so far. So we're going to Heather Plett. And oh, there's a question. Does he work with Daniel Christian Wall or Robin Lincoln Wood? I don't know, Kylie. I have no idea. But yeah, feel free to send him an email and ask him. I have personally, I have no idea if he does. He has a huge network when it comes to the systemic. So I think that he knows almost everyone in the field. So if the people you mentioned, because they sound new to me, I don't know them, but maybe he does. So I have no idea. So let's go to Heather Plett about holding liminal space, the leadership quality needed for our next shift. And we started off with what opened up the world to Heather, or what opened up Heather to the world, depending on how you want to look at it. And from a very personal experience also, just like Christian, but a different one, was when her mother passed away, and she wrote a blog post about the palliative nurse who was taking care of her family while they were saying goodbye to their mother, who then passed away. And it wasn't until a few years later that she wrote the blog post and what that then did in the world. And so she's developed the holding space concept. And this is something that she explained in this session. And also when she deepened the concept, when she actually said, okay, so what does this mean? I can leave it at that and let it go into the world, or do I want to deepen this? And she decided to deepen it. Carry on. You add as a key point, importance to give personal space in a professional setting. And this is really important. So a key point or key competency for leaders to have is to hold that liminal space also in a professional setting, so that when there's a lot of turbulence in our work, in our organizations, for example, that there is still space that's held for those who find it difficult to be in the liminal. Let's see if anything else pops up. And then we'll continue. So, evolutionary purpose with George Poor was the session that followed up after Heather's one. And what I found really profound about this session is that I understood the difference between purpose, mission, and evolutionary purpose. And that, at least the way George explained it, that purpose isn't static, that it's also something that evolves, and that a really beautiful way to find your evolutionary purpose is to ask yourself or have someone else ask you, what is the question that your life is the answer to? And yeah, so that's a very important way of, I was just really blown away by that question when I first heard it from him. And I thought it would be really valuable to discuss this in the summit. So let's see if there are any other key points that you would like to add to that as well. I don't see anything yet. So I'll just continue. And please also, it's okay to give me feedback if things need to speed up or slow down. It's very important. It's our joint creation of this live Q&A. So it's very important that we are at the right pace. Rob, what you write is co-evolving yourself and others in the environment. Exactly. So we do not evolve as an independent, isolated individual system. We co-create our evolution, and it happens at different levels. And so something that was also important that he mentioned is to find your tribe and to co-create with them and to co-evolve with them. And that many leaders in businesses find themselves that they can evolve only so far. And then at some point, they just need their tribe to evolve with their purpose, and they can no longer do it on their own. Kylie, you say, George's work is what brought me here. I love the energy, structure, interdependency, and ongoing dance. Right, couldn't agree with you more. We are going on to the sessions from Thursday. And we started off with Leading Highly Anxious Systems with Catherine Tyler Scott. And what I recall from her session is many things, but one in particular is the importance of inner work as a leader, and to really understand what it takes to be that, on one hand, stabilizing factor, and on the other hand, the co-creating factor, when the system that you fulfill a leadership role in is highly anxious, and how the importance of creating trust and having self-efficacy, and then a whole list of other things that we laughed about as, oh, this sounds almost like perfect. But being also compassionate in the process when you are doing that, when you are fulfilling a leadership role. Anyone else would like to add to the key points of the individual speaker sessions? If not, we are quickly continuing to the next one. And that is key points for the session with Matthias about visual strategy, the why and how of visualization. And there's how do you say, you say that The session with Catherine Tyler Scott reminded you so much about Edgar Schein and humble leadership or humble consulting. Thank you for adding that. I hadn't made that bridge yet. I hadn't connected the two just yet, like you are doing right now. So with Matthias, all about the visualization. To me, a very lighthearted conversation and a very powerful tool to see what's going on in the system right now, and that it can be used for any type of meeting or gathering where people are having a conversation about decisions that need to be made in the system, or things to be explored in the system, and that the thing that's most talked about isn't not necessarily the most important one. Um, to let the flow create the picture and letting space exist. Exactly. So there was also an example with one company where they found an empty space in all the drawings, or an empty space in what wasn't said. And they decided to just acknowledge the empty space, and to acknowledge that, okay, this is what's in our system right now. The space is empty in this particular area. And rich pictures question mark. You say, I'm not sure what you mean. But what I do know is that Matthias said that his clients experience it as um, very strong impact. So the richness of the pictures is everything that was said is on the wall, and even things that were like they tended to marginalize or not give any room is still on the wall. So everything is up there, and then you can just look at all that's in the system. Karyan, thank you so much. There are different approaches to using it, and just to recall them, one is that Matthias would be an observer, and then in a meeting, for example, and see and listen to what everyone is talking about, and then create the visualizations that way. Or he would interact with them and involve them in the visualization process, or he would let the client do the visualization, and he would support them in actually creating the drawings. And to have these different ways of working with it, the observing being the least that he uses now, is that everyone feels involved in so this is where we are as a system. Okay, the last one on Thursday was with Sarah Carnelli from Australia. That's why it was, at least in European time, a little later, so that we had the people from Australia could join at a time where they weren't in bed. And we talked about systems intelligence in the corporate space. What I very much recall from Sarah is that one, her personal experience with the richness of the systemic view in her work, but also in her life, and how she introduces this to leaders, not necessarily by mentioning that something is systemic, but actually working with them, starting to work with them, and to use non-jargon, and to invite them to the question, how many times when you need to make a decision, do you actually make the decision from what your gut tells you? And this is something that I found really profound in talking to her, but also about the difference between working with symptoms and working with where we actually find the causes of patterns that are not working in systems. We also talked about the difference between the role that you fulfill, whether you're a leader in the system or if you are a consultant or coach to the system, and what you then bring and what you don't bring, and what you can and what you cannot do. Hi, George. Thank you for joining us from Kenya. We are going through the different sessions in this closing session. So thanks for joining. Anyone else would like to add to Sarah Cornelli before we go off to what was on Friday? Anne, you say, I am with the flow of life, not against it. I trust the process of life and I have to listen to the voices of life. That's where you quote Sarah. Thank you so much for adding that. There's so much more flow and fluidity in life with systems intelligence, at least in Sarah's experience, than without it. And there's also that childlike quality of curiosity and the way of looking at and experiencing life. Yeah, Rob, thank you for reminding us of that one where the client was given options. Do you want to have individual coaching for 9 months or more, or do you want to have systemic coaching in 2.5 hours? And the client chose to explore the systemic and actually got to implementing a solution, a direction that worked so much faster than had she done the one-on-one typical coaching that most leaders ask for and know. So thanks for adding that, Rob. Well, I'd like to continue with the Friday sessions, and we're starting with Nora Bateson. And we talked about liminal leadership. That was a relaunched session. I thought it was so rich that I put it on the summit again. And we've had a massive response to Nora's session also. So I really wonder what your learning points were. Actually, Nora is a returning speaker in the Systemic Leadership Summit. I so much enjoyed talking to her. And what was so important in this session is, for example, the stepping out of the rationalizing into really being with the liminal, and how important that step is and how difficult it is to be with the not knowing. And yeah, but there were so many takeaways from this session. I want to give you space also to speak to this. So what are the things that you recall from session with Nora? Let's see if something pops up in the chat. I'm still looking. Kylie, too much to summarize here. Definitely too much. But you say, I thought this point was critical. There is no money to be made from the caretaking the world needs now. And this is a very important point. Things that we brought up is that it's very important to let the systemic be very vocal over the years that we've been talking. But in this session, the emphasis is again also on if we keep sticking to the old way of wanting to make a massive amount of money, we are not going to do what's ecologically the best thing for mankind. And so we're just going to push ourselves over the edge if we continue with the money-making business as a first priority. So there's something else that we need to do to have a healthy planet and a healthy life here on Earth. And you add, we are organizing ourselves around symptoms, and we do need to organize ourselves into interconnected spaces to find interconnected solutions. Thanks for adding that, Anne. Yeah. And actually, that's pretty much parallel. As long as we keep connecting around symptoms, it's going to be about the money, about the results, about the bottom lines, about things like that, but not the actual things that are going to keep us alive, or let alone thrive, to speak in Alexander Laszlo's words again. Okay, I'm going to continue. There's more to say about Nora, but I'm looking at the clock also. It's going so fast, the time. And we have a few more speakers. We also have the exploration around transformative leadership, but also generative conversation and generative interactions with Dr. Aftab Omir. Kylie, I see that you add all the plates need to be moved at the same time because we're so interconnected still from Nora Bateson's session. So thanks for that one. Yeah, I have a question around this one, and I also put that in somewhere, I think in the online community space, where I asked everyone, could you be with the space and pace of this session? Because it was so different from all the other sessions. And to me, it was a very profound session in the sense that we were actually thinking and generating content in the moment. So no preset questions, no preparation, no nothing. We just sat and opened our mouths and started a conversation that was, at least to our experience, a very generative, and also a way to slow down and to actually think instead of reiterate thoughts that you've had before. Antonio, you'd like to add, as a personal note, most of the times we worry about the persons because we believe they are the symptoms instead of working on the causes, which are the dynamics. Yeah. Yeah, that's not just in Nora's sessions, that is in almost all sessions. Sometimes it's emphasized more than in other sessions, but yeah, definitely also in Nora's session. Anyone else to add anything to Dr. Aftab Omir's session? I don't see anything in the chat popping up just yet. It may in a few seconds, but I am moving on to Ella Saltmarsh, who talks about the role of story in systems change. And I'm really curious what you thought of this session. I really enjoyed it, especially story as light, glue, and web, and the different examples of that, and how stories can create and break systems also. That the importance of story in how our systems actually evolve and what we can do with story. So I thought that was a pretty profound one also. I say that about almost all sessions, but I really believe so in their own right and their own color and what they bring to the table. And this was actually a very last minute interview that was added to the bigger summit. So it's a very recent interview that was broadcast on Friday. Kylie, by changing narratives, we can unlock systems, but stories for us are like water for fish. Most of it is invisible to us. Thanks for sharing that, Kylie. And when we're actually talking about that point about the water and the fish, usually that's an analogy that I use and some other speakers in this systemic leadership previous summits used to explain the systemic. And so narratives and story are very much in the systemic realm, and they are about meaning making and sense making and uh, yeah, not necessarily also about truth creating, although that's a whole different subject. But the stories very much tie us together. I'm moving on to Peter Robertson um, about ecology in business. Actually, I was walking outside today as it's Sunday, and I was doing the same thing that I mentioned in that session is walk around, and I passed the apple trees that are now completely empty because it's winter here in the Netherlands. And I recalled, and I was listening to Peter talking about the S curve and the importance of the seasons of organizations. By the way, thanks so much, Kylie, for adding that you felt intrigued about letting the story go and where it wanted to go with the campaign, the She Votes campaign that Ella co-created with together with others. So, yeah, ecology in business. What is it that you recall from this session? It's still online. It's still accessible. So I'm not sure if you saw it yet. It was released yesterday. Let's see if there are things that you'd like to add. But the S curve and the seasons of how an organization grows and evolves, and also what happens if there is so much focus on generating revenues, for example, that there's no recuperation, there's no winter, there's no time to reflect and to regain strength and to then go into spring again. And to go by skipping winter, for example, or any of the seasons, or trying to do the strategy that doesn't fit the space and place where you are on the S curve, then it can be hazardous for your organization. Thanks, Antonio, for the suggestion about maybe we could gather all the books material and the summit speakers recommended and share it on the site. That's definitely something that we could do. There was another question about that in the online community space, actually, and I have that here in the Q&A. So thanks for sharing that, Antonio. A lot of linking in your mind, Kylie, between Peter's and Nora's session. Second reflection point seems to be a liminal space. Yeah, there is a lot. Even though they have very distinct sessions, there are quite some parallels, and that has to do with the ecological. Nora is also very much into ecology. And so there's similar patterns in what they discuss and how it's brought forth, etc. Yeah. I'm moving on to the last session of our speaker sessions with Catherine Long. And we talked about the application and the practice of systemic approaches or systemic leadership approaches and what she experienced in learning and applying them for herself with clients. And what I found so interesting is that she also emphasized how important it is to focus on community development. Um, and Yeah, I'm wondering what you took away from her session. I know that especially people in the online community also shared with her what they learned, and she is in the online community space, just like Nomi Nathan and Klaus was also in there to answer some questions and remarks around that. So let's see if there's something you still want to say about Catherine. Meanwhile, I'm taking a sip of water. I don't see anything popping up in the chat just yet. So a few more seconds to see if there's anything that you would like to share about Catherine's session. Rob, her reference to Eugene Gendlin's focusing sounded interesting. It sounded interesting indeed. And this is also a reference to something that for me is in the slowing down and the mindfulness area that was touched upon a couple of times in the summit also. Yeah, creating the enabling conditions for the systems to change themselves, Kylie. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that one also again. So especially if you're working with leaders, is what can we actually do when they want to start creating systemic change or anything like that, and you're guiding them? How do you actually work with them then? I asked Catherine. And that's exactly what she said. So working with the conditions that enable the organization to then let changes emerge rather than pushing and pulling them. Yeah, Antonio, so that's what you're saying. What you like about Kylie's insight is facilitating change is so much more important than the consultant role. Having said that, that's not always the easy one, because sometimes you're brought in as a consultant rather than a facilitator. Those things have different, the words and the role names have different connotations to them. And so it can be, let me speak for myself, it can be a very tricky thing to be hired for one thing and do the other thing. So it's also about how you co-create a system with your client where you can actually do more of the enabling than the consulting and telling what to do or advising. Yeah, soil and environment preparation, but Catherine's expression was much, much better. Thanks, Kylie. So we've come to the end of all the sessions. And yeah, I just wanted to really briefly go to the main themes, because you have a couple of questions I want to answer. And we're already over an hour in, so it's going really fast with the time. And this is the umbrella of the summit. See the system first, foster generative communication and interaction, and co-create sustainable solutions and transform the system. Now, this is the umbrella for all of our summits that we've had so far. But there are a couple of other main themes, especially in the 2019 area. So like I said in the beginning, in the kickoff session where I did my introduction, but also in Peter Senji's session, these three are very much the core of a way of using systemic approaches to leadership and to transformation in our organizations and communities and in ourselves. But yeah, I'd like to invite you to share with me what are some of the other main themes that you discovered in this summit? And I have a couple of slides about them, but I think it's more important that you have an opportunity to mention them. So, what are some crosslinks, some big themes besides this umbrella that you saw or experienced in the summit? I'm looking again at the chat. Liminal space and liminal thinking. Thanks, Kylie. So that's definitely one. Liminal space, liminal thinking. Very important theme. The word liminal appeared in two sessions, one with Heather Platt and one with Nora Bateson, but it definitely popped up in other sessions as well. While I'm looking for what's happening in the chat, let me mention one. And one, for example, that popped up in many sessions is about purpose. And so it was definitely very explicitly in George Poor's session about evolutionary purpose. But purpose was also in Peter Senge's session, in Catherine Tyler Scott's session, in Christian Kroma's session. So there were some very distinct places where purpose was mentioned as something crucial. The importance of self-leadership, exactly. Ecology, acceptance, and nurturing. And Antonio, you say, I believe that as a community, we should create a common language. And there you refer to something that is at least part of my purpose with the Systemic Leadership Summit. Is one of the things that I found is that there are many different systemic approaches, but everyone uses their own language and everybody uses their own jargon and their own approaches and their own ways of working. And there's no one big framework where we can all tap from. And there is a huge diversity amongst the different systemic approaches to leadership, but also systemic approaches in general. And so, yeah, I definitely, that's definitely part of the mission of the summit. By looking at all the diverse approaches, it's also possible to see some where the commonalities are, and how our bigger system of systems thinking and of systemic leadership is evolving and how it's growing, and the words that we want to use to support that growth. I see new leadership lies in netarchy instead of hierarchy, and also organization will be limited to the level of development or consciousness of the leader. Or as one of the speakers said, as George Poor said, the evolutionary purpose will probably be articulated by the people who hold the biggest worldview, because there's most potential for evolution. So thanks for that. Any other main theme before we close this off when we finally get to your questions? Okay, let me leave it at that. Q&A. We are jumping into the questions. And here I have Anne's question, and I know that you are online, Anne. So thank you so much for your question. Let me read it again. And of course, I'm going to respond to this, but I also want to hear others in the chat about how they see it and what they think. And your question is, how can I, as an external change agent, consultant, coach, organization developer, invite more leaders, top leaders, towards taking a systemic leadership role? Meaning guiding them from ego leadership towards eco-friendly leadership, systemic leadership. So it's not about benefiting themselves and short-term gains. It's more about being in service of the bigger system, the greater whole sustainable world. While knowing out of my own experience that this demands an increased personal consciousness and awareness, and that it is about and starts with going the interpersonal leadership journey themselves. So big question. Sure, and this is what it's all about. So Antonio writes something. I don't know if this is part of the answer to your question, but it says, leading as a change consultant or facilitator from an abundance, collaboration mind, jargon most of the time services when language isn't built as collective creation. Maybe this is still a remark from what you said before, Antonio. I'm not entirely sure. But Anne, back to your question. Let me respond to this. So I have a similar role that you also have. So I work as an external senior change consultant, an executive coach, and I also do systems work. And when I work with top leaders, then this is also part of one of the missions with my summit, is that I noticed that the ego leadership is not bringing any sustainability to an organization, and it's definitely also not adding to the effectiveness of change endeavors. And so I think that was very important, because we see something that they don't see yet. And so it's very important to not make them wrong. And it's also very important to take baby steps. And I think that's something that you wrote down somewhere at the beginning of the chat when we started the Q&A. What can be an inspiration is, for example, what Sarah Carnally said when I asked her a similar question. She said that she doesn't use a jargon. She doesn't say that she's working systemically. She does it. And she uses small examples and baby steps. So that's one thing. What's also important is to meet your client where they are. Some are more open to the systemic than others. Most leaders were taught the ego type of leadership that we see in the world today, and that is leadership. And if there's a way for them to be even more effective with their change endeavors, that's something they'll want to hear from you. So again, when we go back to Sarah, where she gave certain clients, not all clients, but certain clients, an option. Do you want to have the slow track of coaching that you know, or do you want to have a faster track that's systemic, that you don't know yet? And so it's also about seeing where the system, with the leaders you are working with, is open to new ideas and new things and new approaches, and which ones aren't. What I also find is that it's very important to see where your energy goes when you meet a leader who embodies more the ego type of leadership. What do you do in your system? Um, do you judge them? Do you think that they have an approach that's not working, or that they shouldn't be taking on, that it's not the best way, that it's not sustainable? Um, um, because it's not so much about pointing out what's the right or wrong way. It's more about really meeting them where they are, and also being honest with yourself. Am I able to work with people who have the more traditional or the more linear leadership style? And am I able to add to their systems? And then there's also the knowledge of who do I want to work with, work for. And for example, I asked Christian Kramer also the question, well, how do you sell this? And how do they respond when you tell them, if you're going to continue to walk around like a dinosaur in that metaphor, then you're going to become extinct? And what he mentioned is that the people who actually get it don't sleep for a couple of nights, because their only way to survive with their organization is to create offspring. Now, the people who are set in their ways, and they don't go to those type of meetings, and they definitely continue sleeping. They have no problem with that. So it's also about, where do you want to bring your creative and change energy, and which systems are open to something that you can also offer them, so that they can have longer longevity, more effective change processes that are much more eco-friendly. So these are the things that I can share with you at this point. So there are some sessions in the summit where there's partial answers to this question. What could also be really interesting is that we continue the discussion around this question, because for me, it's a very continuous question. And for me, it's also about who do I serve, and who can I serve, and who do I want to serve, from the role that I have, the resources that I have. And does it make sense for me to work in an environment where there's so much short-term focus going on? Can I really add to the change endeavors there? And more and more, the answer to that question for me, my role is no. So it's also about making a choice. Do I want to go the route of trying to lift a dinosaur, or do I want to be with a system that is a little bit more open? Yeah, thanks for adding your comments. For example, Kylie, the alignment of purpose and openness between consultant and client, that's critical, and choosing whether you want to energize the role or not. So that's the same as the internal or an external role, whether you're a change consultant or anything on a different role. And Antonio, the CEO or top executives, it's tough to make changes happen in organization if top layers aren't aware and willing. And that's especially in hierarchy-based organizations, which is still by far the majority of structures that we find in our organizations. And so, yeah, if the leadership role and function is not focused that way, or not open to that, it's very likely that the entire system is not. It's not entirely impossible, but it's much more difficult. So, Anne, I hope that this answers your question, that you have some input on this. And well, I'm at least definitely open to continue working with this and to also see what this means for how we shape our roles and professions. So looking forward to continuing discussion around this question also in the online community space where we both are. So thanks. Thanks for comparison, dinosaur. Burn my hands on the dinos already. Yes, I know what that's like, and it can be pretty painful. So, yeah, so really pick your battles, and um, sometimes it's about the holding space more than being the martyr to throw another one in. Um, Yeah, dragons, dinosaurs, there's all kinds of words. Paul, help them realize that this is in their interest to understand that things are systemic and that they need to become increasingly systemically self interested rather than narrowly selfish. Well, Paul, I couldn't agree more. And actually, the presentation that I shared in the kickoff is also my attempt to find words that are going to speak to people in the corporate space in a non-jargony way. And I'm saying it's an attempt. I'm not done with it yet, like I said in the beginning. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one trying to find different ways to have the conversation with leaders and to invite them to step into the systemic world and see what they find. So, and I think it's also about what Peter Senji said, to go on these reflective journeys where they become more fluid in entering spaces that are different from their own frame of reference. Lots of going on with T-Rexes and all that stuff. Yeah, and sometimes it's just sometimes they just really don't know. They're not aware of this information, and so yeah. Um, well, I think it's an opportunity for us to find ways to cross the boundary with them and have generative conversations with them. So on to the next question, which is also tied to what you proposed, Antonio, and that is that you said that what Cici Zhang said in our online community space. I don't think she's on. I haven't seen her online before. But her question was, can we build a self-study? Building a self-study curriculum. What specific books, papers, talks, resources, formal programs, etc., were critical in deepening your understanding? And Antonia, what you said earlier in this session is, why don't we just gather a list of all the books and reference materials that the speakers talked about and or wrote themselves, and so that we can share them online. And I think that's a really good idea. And I think the best place for that to do that is the online community space, since that's where we can all find each other. Obviously, I have a shorter list of reference books of what the speakers in this summit, but also in other summits, either wrote or shared. So that's definitely something that I could add. But I also invite you to write down the references that were mentioned in the summit sessions of this particular summit. And yeah, let's start an overview of that. So anyone, any other ideas around that? Because I think it's brilliant. And yeah, online community space is also for that. So any other remarks before we continue? Simon, you ask, are there any business cases out there that could be used to get them understand, be open to exploring change, to justify that they have to put some work in? Well, actually, I do have a number of business cases where it worked really well with my clients. Um, I'm putting them together in an online masterclass that will be up in a while, free for everyone to watch, where I worked with clients in different industries, usually some bigger companies, where I worked with them to work on problems that really mattered to them and where they were stuck in their change processes. And these are examples like a major downsizing, for example. Um, then there is a major improvement of customer experience in a multinational corporation. And then there is a major change process and also a multinational corporation more in the chemical industry. So there's all these different examples that I have, and I'm sure that there are many people who attended this summit who also have very tangible situations, change processes, and business cases that that can help illustrate the choice that leaders make to work more systemically, and in my case, where I work with them more systemically, and what that brought to the table. But also, that is not the easy route. It's not the short-term thing. It's not the it's the road less taken. And but by showing that there are people in that space, and this is for me the corporate space because I work there a lot, but there's also in different areas and also with institutions or NGOs or in education. There's so many people who are in education also where there are examples of where it's working and that it takes effort and time. Okay, so more people wanting to add to the book overview as well. But thanks for your question, Simon. Simon, I also thought that you had another question in the beginning of our session, and I said, hang on, because we're going to get the Q&A session, and that is now. So I don't recall what your question was, so could you please copy paste it in the chat or type it again so that we can have a look at it before we continue. Some of you may be waiting for, okay, what's happening with All Access Pass? Am I going to win this thing or not? And after Simon's question, we're going to get to that. So Simon, what was your question again? Some leaders, quite a lot, are miles away from this type of thinking. I am looking for ways to help them move in this direction, educating them. Any suggestions, baby steps? Okay, so actually your question was quite similar to Anne's. And I want to know that in answering that, do you have an answer to that now, or do you need some more input? Actually, my other thoughts that pop up as you may start typing an answer, as Simon or anyone else, is it could be quite insightful to work, if you work with leaders, to start with seeing the system first and to start with where do we find ourselves. So for example, Peter Robertson had a very tangible, easy way of seeing the system or creating more awareness in the system by letting them plot themselves on the S-curve, for example. Or if they're open to it, they can do a paper constellation like Nomi explained. Or yeah, there are other small steps that they can do to actually create more awareness of looking at the system. There's all kinds of ways that you can do that. Sometimes you can ask leaders, okay, if you were looking from the outside in and really looking from the outside in, sometimes I take a leader out of their buildings and we go and have lunch and then look at their organization from the outside. And I ask them, what do you see? And it's then an invitation to look at the system. And usually when you do the baby steps like that, slowly things will trickle in. So start small and start with awareness about the systemic, awareness about the system, before jumping with all kinds of systems thinking theory on them. That's not going to happen, or help them open up more. Offering a package list includes subscription to Jen's course about the about to be opened. Thanks, Antonio. Anyway, Simon, I hope that this helps. I would like to continue. I didn't see any other questions pop up. They may, but I do want to go to the evaluation and to the draw in the All Access Pass draw contest. So all of you who have completed an evaluation survey, the evaluation of the Systemic Leadership Summit 2019, thank you so much for doing that. I have over 20 surveys now. It is still open until upcoming Friday, until 11:59 p.m. Central European Time. It will be open. And after that, I'll be happy to share some detailed results of how this summit was received. But so far, I've had a massive positive response and countless testimonials that are really raving about the summit. So thank you so much for your appreciation of this event. And I asked you to submit it by 6 p.m. today if you wanted to be in the draw. So everyone who has not completed yet, please use the link. It's everywhere in the emails that I sent in the past few days. I'll probably send a reminder email tomorrow to also include this link so you can still fill it out. Everyone will receive the digital copy of my ebook. Well, it is an ebook. So we'll receive a copy of my ebook anyway if you complete the survey. But for today, it was about the All Access Pass. And so let's see. Yeah, there's some things going on in the chat. Particularly the summit, we need to have an integrated approach as facilitators also. Yeah, thanks. The chat will stay on this session, and this session will stay online on the YouTube channel. So I am going to be reading the chat all over again to see what the things are that are popping up in our system and what we are initiating and co-creating here. Okay, so drum roll indeed, Antonio. We are going to go to the winners. And I actually have to draw them. I thought it would be wonderful to do this live. So I hope that the live thing is still online, but that in 2 seconds. So eligibility, I don't like the word, to win is complete the survey and to complete it by 6 p.m. earlier today. And so we are going to draw 4 winners. There's 3 people who can win an all-access pass for the entire summit of 2019, so all the sessions from past week, plus the MP3 versions of them. They are in our online school, so you'll have access to the SLS 2019 in our online school, which is on the platform Teachable. And Teachable also has a great app where you can also watch and listen to everything on your iPhone. So I'm not sure if it's open for Android yet, but it's open for iPhone people. 3 winners I'm going to pick in a second. And then there's also going to be 1 very lucky person who will win an all access to all the summits that are in our online school. So ever since it started in 2017, and then the 2018, and then the past summit that we just had last week. So let's see, out of all the 40 people, and how I want to do this is I found this really interesting, fun online space. Wow, many people still joining me online. My email, everything's still open. Here we are. So I put all 40 people. I hope you can still see my screen. Yeah. And on my screen, I put all 40 people in an online spin. And so I'm going to draw them now and write down the names and read them out loud. So first I'm going to draw 3 people who are going to win an all access pass for 2019. Here we go. The first one. Let's see. And the first one is, okay, Rashan Omar. I don't know if you were online, Rashar. I haven't seen you in the chat. Let me type this in my notes. Antonio, you're asking me if I can send the link to the draw. Yeah, sure. I think I'll put it in the chat or somewhere, or I can send it to you on LinkedIn. So Rashan Omar. Rashan, whether you were online or not, you won an all access pass for 2019. So Rashan, you are going to go off the list now because you can win only once. And then here's number 2. And we have Paul Baker. Paul, I know that you were on, or you were on earlier. Paul, you won an all access pass for the 2019. Paul Baker, let me write that down. Paul, I hope you're still online. I don't see you in the chat yet, but I'm hoping that you're doing a happy dance right now. And Paul, you're going to go off the list. And then there's the last one. So spin for an all access pass for 2019. And we have Guy Amir. I know that you're online. I hope that you're happy. I hope that you're seeing this. So Guy, you won an all access pass for 2019. Congrats to all the winners. And then we have one more. This will take a second. So after this kickoff set or this Q&A session, I will make sure that I contact you all. So Rashan, Guy, and Paul, and make sure that you have access to our online school for SLS 2019. Now we have one more person, and you're welcome, Guy. Systemic rocks. Thanks, Guy. I'm glad to see you so happy. We have one more person in the draw that we're going to take out, who will win an all access to all our Systemic Leadership Summit editions. And the all access passes for everyone, by the way. All winners are valid for 1 year. So you have a whole year access until our next summit in 2020. So I think that's Sunday, January 11, 2020, something like that. So here's the last one. Fingers crossed for everybody. And the winner is Karen. So Karen, the first lady in the winner draw, Karen Muller, you have won access to all 3 Systemic Leadership Summits. Congratulations. I don't know if you are online. I haven't seen you online before, but I'll definitely make sure to contact you. So everyone here is witness that Karen Muller won the All Access Pass to all of our summits. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you're not too disappointed that you didn't win if you are not amongst the winners. But I quickly want to say something about how you can continue. So whether you are one of the winners or not, you have an opportunity to continue participating in the SLS 2019. Even though all their sessions are over, there is the All Access Pass and how to make most of it. You can still purchase an All Access Pass. I'm going to leave the current price open until midnight, and then it's going to go to our online school pricing, which is substantially higher, almost twice as much. So if you really want to have an Access Pass and watch everything for a full year, then please purchase it today, because then you'll still have the during summit price. If you want to have more information about what is this thing about, what's in it, then you can go to this URL, so systemicleadershipsummit.com/thank-you. I could show you all about it, but I'm very conscious about the time. I think it's very important to make sure that that we're still a little bit within a reasonable time. You've been on for such a long time already, so thank you so much for joining and sticking with us. But to briefly mention it, it is the video sessions, all the video sessions in the summit, all the MP3s, so you have access to all of that. You have access to the Teachable app, where you can just access everything that you have in Teachable. So also our online school. And then you can watch the videos or listen to the MP3s on your iPhone. So it makes it really easy to listen when you are walking, working out, whatever you're doing, and you want to spend some time listening to the sessions, then that's something you can also do. I know that many All Access Pass holders listen to our sessions in the car. So when they're commuting, they're still plugged into the Systemic. Another way to continue participation is in our online community space. I bombarded you with the link in all the emails in the past week. So you have that link to your disposal. In it, I want to continue the conversation about Systemic Leadership Summit, but also about systemic leadership in general. We have some ideas already about exchanging books and resources on there to really co-create something more around the systemic leadership, and I definitely want to facilitate that. During the summit, it was closed for Systemic Leadership Summit 2019 participants only, but it will stay open now. It will also open for people who did not participate. Now, I announced that in the group because I do want to give you an opportunity to speak to that if that's something that you think we are ready for. Because to me, this is also a systemic process. So if I know that many people, they also wrote that in the survey, have not have an opportunity to be in the online community yet because they're still processing and reflecting on their own. But they may jump into the community, and it could be a lot of fun to still have focus on the summit and the summit experiences and learnings, etc. Then I am working on a mastermind. I really want to go into these materials a little deeper than we've done up until this point. In the summits, you can do only so much. And summits are like a banquet. You don't know where to look, and you can easily overeat, and then it's difficult to process it all. So I want to facilitate, besides the online community, which is more of an open space, but in the mastermind, I just really want to go deeper into the materials and facilitate an even stronger understanding and a stronger practice of systemic, and then specifically also systemic leadership in the context of growing, strong, healthy, living human systems. So that's a few ways where you can continue participation. Of course, there's some things that I mentioned that are coming up, like my masterclass, which is also something, but more on that later. What I also do, not so much tied to the summit, but tied to the systemic, is that I have my weekly video, and you may have seen it on Tuesdays, 9 o'clock CET. I send out a video in a video series. Usually it's a short video, somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes, where I share an insight or a systemic rule or systemic way of looking at things, just to give you value, regardless of the role that you're in, so that you can function in systemic context more and better, and that you can also help build stronger living human systems. So all kinds of different ways to continue participating, specifically in the summit context or with the summit materials, and also in a wider sense of things that I'm doing and offering. Let's see, we're almost at the end. Yeah, let's see. Oh, hi, Paul, you found your prize. I never win things like this. Well, this time you do. This time you do. Any closing words? Well, for me, I'm just starting off, and I'm just going to then read if there's any closing words that you would like to mention. But I would like to say this is the best summit that we've had so far in terms of people participating, in terms of also participating in the live sessions, how many people were there, the liveliness in the chats, interacting and learning out loud, and yeah, daring to step in or daring to jump in, like Catherine Long said in her session, as it was aired yesterday. And so from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for joining. We need so many people to step into the systemic realm and to be in the liminal and to work with it and to live with it. And so, yeah, I hope that it was valuable to you. It was valuable investment of your time this week to spend on watching the sessions, letting it sit in your mind, and feeling it perhaps in terms of embodiment, in terms of stepping into it. And I really hope that it supports you in whichever role you fulfill, whether you are a leader in business or an institution, whether you are a coach, a consultant, a leadership coach, whether you are a systems thinker or an entrepreneur, regardless of your role. Yeah, I just really hope that this summit was valuable in terms of theory and practice and taking your role in systems further. So thank you so much for being here. And let's see if there are any closing words that you want to say before I say goodbye to you for now. Let's see. Here is Simon. Many thanks, Jen, for organizing the summit. Very insightful. Best wishes. Thanks, Simon. Hope to see you again soon, also in the online community. And thanks for holding this systemic space. So we could learn. You're welcome, Anne. And feel free to contact me around your question because it's a big question. It's an ongoing thing. And I think it could be powerful to answer it with more people who have roles like we do. Kylie, this is the best summit I've seen. Really? Well, thank you, Kylie. I feel very honored. Stunning work. We need more. You need more of me. Well, I don't know how to clone myself. I wish I could. I'm extremely exhausted. I want you to know. So I'm going to go on a holiday after this or something, or just sit and reflect and not do anything in my home. But thank you so much that you appreciate my work. Antonio, thanks. This last 2 days caught me in the start of my vacations, but trying to catch up. Regards to everyone from Montevideo, Uruguay. Oh, did we have your country up, Uruguay? I have no idea. Listening from the hotel. Well, thanks for tuning in, and for your drawing also in the online community space. If you have more visuals, please share them. They are amazing. So thanks, Antonio, so much for being on. In one word, integrate. It was for you. Put all the competencies into one coherent approach we can use for organizations. So thanks, Antonio. Carrie-Ann says, thanks, Jen. It was really great summit. Lots of different views and things to reflect. Exactly. Yeah. Good luck with all the reflecting. Please think out loud in the online community space if that's something that you would also like to do. Kylie, cloning sounds like a wonderful idea. Oh, well, I'm not so sure about that. There's more sides to me than summit hosts. Rob, thank you, and the SLS team for the opportunity to experience SLS 2019. Excellent. Thank you so much, Rob, and also for being mindful of my team. My team is very small. I have two other members in my team besides myself, and we have a team meeting tomorrow. I'll definitely pass it on to them for supporting me and in bringing this into the world. So thank you so much, Rob, for that also. Well, that's all there is in the chat. That's all there is that I have to share. To all Access Pass winners, I will be in touch with you and making sure that you have access to your All Access Passes. And thank you so much, everyone, for being on the Q&A. I'd like to close off the Systemic Leadership Summit 2019. See you in the online community, or see you in the next summit. And speaking of seeing, I'm just quickly going to open my camera and wave at you. So thank you so much, and take care. Bye-bye.